Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first Literally Dead book club discussion of 2025. This is a conversation about Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I am quite sick. I don't know if you can hear it. Pretend you can't. So if I have to cough a lot, I'll try to mute. If I'm a little less coherent than normal, that's just the way it is. So first up, I have 3 brand new faces who have never been here before, who so kindly are here to join me. So while they introduce themselves, I would love in the comments if you could give us an emoji. I like to give you emojis. If you've read it, give me something magical in the comments, like any type of magical emoji. If you're here for the whole conversation, spoilers are to come. If you haven't read it yet and you're waiting to be convinced, hopefully we will do that with the first question. Before we get into full spoilers, you can give us a little skull. So, but I want to hear from all of you. The pressure's on. Tell me your name. Tell me anything you want to tell me about your channel, like what you like to read. It feels weird to be pitch yourself, because I like to share. I like to share. I want everyone to check your channels out. If you could tell me a recent favorite mystery, thriller, or horror book, I feel like that's a good way to gauge somebody's taste and vibe. So let's start there.
Okay. My name. Okay, yeah.
You got
it. Great. I totally got my name. My name is Jade. My channel is primarily focused on reading, writing, and my life in Japan. And I'm also a political fantasy author. As far as what I like to read, suspense, speculative, horror, triply so if it's queer. Gideon the Ninth is my all-time favorite book, which is horror. And then Wrong Place, Wrong Time got me more into speculative, thriller mystery. And then begrudgingly, I have a Stockholm Syndrome favoritism towards House of Leaves. So
love that.
Which I'm not too jittery to describe House of Leaves. So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
Is that your book behind you?
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead, show it to us.
Okay.
Take the moment.
Great. Okay. Yeah. This is the Solstice Court.
It's so pretty.
Cozy political fantasy. Yeah. Deals with neutrality, war, but also in a neutral location. So she's choosing between sides and things like that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. Thank you.
I'm Princess, and my channel is Princess Does. I am a chicken and a weenie, so I don't read very much thriller, horror, or any of that stuff at all.
I can't wait to find out how you did with this now.
Yeah.
All right.
When I signed up to be here, I was like, this is probably not the best idea, but I'm here. As far as what I read, I love, obviously, most, basic bitches. I love fantasy and such. Not the hugest romantasy fan, but definitely a fantasy fan. I'm getting into romantasy, but definitely a fantasy fan. I love sci-fi. And if I could think of probably one of the, it wasn't a 5-star read, but a recent thriller horror slasher, You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron. Very short book. I read her other fantasy books, and it's set at a camp, and some weird stuff start happening and people popping up, and you got a cult. It was really, really cool. Unhauled it after I was done with it because I was no. No. But it was really good. So yeah.
That one's YA, right?
I think so, yes.
Okay, yeah.
Fairly sure. Yeah. So yeah. That's me. Hi.
Hi everyone. I'm Pam from This Book Belongs to Pam on BookTube and also on Bookstagram a little bit. I usually read fantasy, also basic bitch, thriller, and recently I realized that I love historical fiction, which was surprising for me. Last year I had so many 5-star historical fictions. I haven't honestly read too many horror mystery thrillers in general, but even more so this year. But the last 5-star one was We Used to Live Here by Margus Cleaver. That is still burned in my brain, that attic scene, if you know. It's still in my brain. So yeah, I think that was my last 5-star.
Nice.
But yeah, that's me. I'm in the Philippines, so it's very sunny. It's hot. I'm sweating. Okay.
It's also very sunny here today, but I am not sweating. It's cold and sunny, which is kind of a perfect vibe.
Yeah.
I just realized like it's been 3 months since I've done a live show. So I am going to also introduce myself. My name's Kayla, and my channel, you know about it. But my recent favorites, okay, I'll tell you about these. My most recent, like 4.5-star horror and mystery are It's Elementary by Elise Bryant and Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy. So you can take these as recommendations if we have similar tastes. I haven't had a 5-star thriller in like 6 months. So that's the current update with me and that genre. That used to be my favorite, and I don't know my relationship with it currently. But we have some upcoming thrillers for the book club. This current month, March, we're reading You're Fatally Invited, and hopefully that one will go incredible for me and everybody else. Okay, let's get into the summary. We're going to have Princess tell us briefly what this one is about. And while she does that, if you want to tell us in the chat what you rated this book, I would love to officially know everybody's thoughts.
Okay.
Spoiler free.
I am going to give the summary. I'm going to apologize in advance. My husband is a gamer. I'm a gamer. So if you hear him in the background, that's what's going on. He's literally on the other side of this wall.
That's
so,
okay.
But, okay. So, Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix, right, is set in the 70s, right? So, in the way back in the heydays, right? And it follows a girl named Fern. That's not her name, by the way, but it follows a girl named Fern. And she got pregnant. And so they her parents ship her to this house that is full of other pregnant younger people. She's like 15, I believe. Mm-hmm. And most of them are younger and such. They're all unwed. And this really is a story about like what was happening back in the day as far as being an unwed mother to be. There is a lot of there's a lot of like kind of some gory stuff. So go into it and knowing that. And it has a lot of different layers, a lot of different things of like what is a mother and like why women were treated that way, like what is power and how can you distinguish power. And that sounded really good, right? I have no idea.
It actually did. I was like, she's going off right now.
Well done.
You did that. It was great.
Thank you.
I want to read the book, but I've already read it.
I know. I was like,
Perfect
whoa,
pitch.
that sounds great.
I am a little overwhelmed by the amount of people in the comments right now. I feel like this is
so
the most
5 stars.
I know people are loving it. I guess this is a pretty popular pick of mine. Like Grady Hendrix is a pretty well-known author. We've never done him for the book club before, and I was intrigued to pick this up and read it all together because I've read every single book of his, I think. So I guess it makes sense. There's a lot of people here, but wow, there's a lot of people here. Okay, I guess let's all share our ratings now. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't love it, that's fine. If you loved it, that's great. I think it'll lead to a good discussion. Hopefully everybody in the comments can feel represented then, because I've seen some 2s, I've seen some 5s. It does seem overwhelmingly positive. So that's exciting when I pick something for thousands of you and it goes well. Okay, I'm gonna give mine last. So Shade, what did you think?
Yeah, the comments do seem overwhelmingly positive. So I'm oscillating between a 2.5 and a 3.
Okay.
I was vibing pretty hard with the first half of the book, but I was gonna take a star off for like some flat characters, but ultimately there was like a very tired use of archetypes and tropes that I kind of just didn't vibe with in the second half. But there were moments that I liked throughout, so I'm still oscillating. I feel like it's probably a 2.5 for me.
Fair.
But it could also be a 3.
And I feel like that's how you went. That's kind of the expectation is you went into it, right? Like
I was actually really surprised by the first half. I went in as a skeptic, so that's definitely true. Went in with a skeptic's idea of if I was going to like this, was pleasantly surprised, and then was not surprised again, which was surprising. So he got me. I got. So yeah.
I feel like I don't know what I'm gonna rate it. I am probably leaning more towards like a 3, if not like maybe like a 2.75-ish area. I appreciate all the 5 stars. That's great. I'm so happy for y'all. This is my second Grady Hendrix book. I read Horror Store first. Not the best idea because I don't like possession, so that wasn't a good idea. But it was really interesting looking. Horror Store is really cool looking.
Mhm.
So I gave about that, probably about 2.75, 3 star. There wasn't a point to where I was like ever like I am having so much fun. Like there was never that wasn't a thing. That wasn't a thing. But it wasn't like, oh, I don't want to read this. It wasn't ever that.
Right.
And the fact that I was on page 251 this morning and I finished, so there's that. But I would say that it was fine, and I can see why people really like it. Oh, and I really want to give him props for writing this, because writing this in this timeline, as well as it being like younger females or female presenting individuals and such. I totally get the flat character thing. Like, the people of color was done dirty as fuck in this book. But like overall, a 3 is pretty good.
I gave it, or I'm hovering between 3.75 and a 4. I feel like this discussion is gonna let me know what my final rating is. I think I mentioned earlier that I was really having fun with historical fiction last year, and I think that carried over to this book, where I really enjoyed the first, I think 3/4 of the book felt really strongly like historical fiction with a little bit of the witchcraft and stuff. And I appreciated the whole reality is a true horror all along narrative throughout the book. But I do find that the witchy parts were a bit like haphazardly written, I think. I feel like the historical fiction was solid, and then I forgot this was a witchy book, so I have to sprinkle the witchy stuff towards the like latter half of the book. So yeah, I think that's why I'm not sure, but depending on how this discussion goes, it could be a 4, it could be 3.75.
Fair. I agree with everything that has been said. All of my thoughts, my brief spoiler-free thoughts, all just were said for me. So I agree. There was some flat characters. I'm glad that he wrote this type of book, though, and it wasn't exactly the genre that I really wanted. But I gave it a 4. I also was hovering at a 3.75 to a 4, but when I think about all of his other books, I almost always give him a 4, and I feel like this is on par with all of them. And I'm happy to have read it.
Consistency.
Right? I was hoping for that shiny 5-star, but that's okay. I was thinking about how I would pitch it to other people if they hadn't read it and they came to the live show wanting to be convinced. My description of it, like genre-wise, is as if it was a cake. The actual cake is historical fiction. This is a historical fiction cake. It does have, a witchy icing and horror sprinkles. But when you cut into it, it's just a historical feminist fiction. And I think it does some great things in that avenue. But if you're going into it, like hoping for a witch book, it's not exactly going to deliver for that. And I think we can talk about that more in the spoilers as they will come. So hopefully that helped people distinguish if they wanted to read it or not. And also the comments, I'm sure there are so many people here who are sharing their opinions, and hopefully that has been helping people. Okay, so what do I want to talk about first? I think I want to talk about characters, because part of me, when I was thinking about how to pitch this, I wanted to call it a coming of age. But I don't think that you get close enough to the characters to call it a coming of age. It's a coming of age timeline, but it's not about the character's personal journey. I think that Grady Hendrix writes books about an event, about a situation, and the characters are the vehicle to tell that story. I don't think he's thinking about the characters first, and I would say that about all of his books. I don't think back on any of his stories and remember a single character name. I remember the scenes. I remember what the books are saying more so than the people, and that's how I feel about this. So I want to know who your favorite and least favorite character were as you were reading it. And then after that, I want to talk about who you would have liked to hear more from. If there were other POVs, who would you have liked to hear from who didn't get their proper, time in the book? But first, let's talk about favorites and least favorites. Who did you like? Who didn't you like? I'll actually go through the characters for anybody in the comments who maybe read this a while ago. So our main character's name is Neva when she starts the story, and they change her name when she gets to the home to Fern. All of the girls who are staying there, who are forced there, they have flower-like names. So we kind of have 4 main characters, I would say. Fern, Rose, Zinnia, and Holly. Fern, Rose, and Zinnia are the ones who got pregnant, still not knowing how you even get pregnant because, you're very oppressed at this time. And women especially aren't getting the information that they need about how not to get pregnant or how birth even works. But Holly is especially harmed because it's an older man in a power position who has gotten her pregnant. And then we have other girls in the house like Iris and Daisy and Flora and Myrtle. I didn't even know Myrtle was a plant going into it. So when I saw her name, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then we have, who else? We have the women who work in, or the people who work in the home. The person who runs it is Miss Wellwood. And then we have Hagar. And then there's someone named Dr. Vincent. And there's a couple other people who don't matter quite as much. And then we also have like the coven members. So they do meet the witchy coven in the woods. And some of their names are Periwinkle, Robin, Dolores, Megs, and Miss Parse, who is the one who kicks off the entire thing because she's the librarian who offers up the book to the girls. That was a lot. Sorry. who did you
a
like?
lot of characters.
Who did you like reading from? Who did you dislike the most, I guess?
So I think because there were some flatter characters, I think that it was kind of hard for me to choose this one, but when I thought about like which character I was rooting for the most, it would have been Holly, and then Mags. I felt like some justice for Mags. And then I also, while Periwinkle was only on page once, it kind of like gave me a little bit of hope of like where the story was possibly going, which she has like 2 lines, side character in the woods, but that's what you get when you have flat characters is, it's kind of an even keel thing. And I actively disliked and hated both the Dr. Vincent and Miss Parse because, we're in spoiler territory.
We are.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah. She was awful.
Let's talk about that bitch.
Yeah, so she was fucking awful, so disliked her.
I think there was one line at the end where they were like, where somebody came to the realization, they were like, oh, these people aren't actually evil. And I was like, no, they are.
No,
Actually, we can hate them. We're allowed to.
That was one of the nails in the coffin for me. Yeah. When they were like, you know what? This has actually been okay. And I was like, are you nuts?
Maybe they're not evil. They just they're just scared of us.
Yeah.
No, they're terrible.
So, yeah.
I would say probably, so I honestly disliked Zinnia through most of it. And I'm just like, girl, come on. Like, let's get it together. Like, but I don't know. It's really strange because it's like she definitely was like super, like she gave me very much like church girl vibes. And because she has like this church, I don't know why she was giving me that vibe, but she gave me like church girl vibes of like, this is evil and stuff. But then I thought about it. I was like, you know what though? It would be the Black person though. That's like, no, definitely not. What are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? Like, no, I don't want to do this. So I was like, okay, cool. But I think the person I liked the most would probably have to be Hagar, even though we don't get much like any type of backstory with him. And but I liked her the most. Everybody else can fucking go. So all the names, everybody else can fucking go. To be honest, starting with what's her name, Diane, the
social worker,
therapist lady.
Oh yeah.
She can fucking go. The owner of the house with the daddy issues, she can go. The main witch, I literally have the head witch, the librarian. I have like a little thing right here. I was like, girl, you're a fucking cult. What you're saying, you're a cult. Like, give me loyalty. Like, who the fuck are you, girl? Like, I don't know you. Like, no. Like, she can go. So yeah. That's my favorite.
Love it.
Everybody else can go. All the other people you named can go. The father can go too, and the mama, and the siblings. All of them. They can all catch it.
I think for me, I agree with Princess. I liked Hagar the most, although, yeah, like all the characters are kind of just, you don't really get much of them. But I like her because she's sassy. She's like, she just tells you what it is. And I like how she's like, oh, here's your food. If you don't want to eat it, then don't eat it. I like how sassy she is. But then the most hated, like a lot of all the adults in this book are just, they're bad, they're evil. But I think I hated Dr. Vincent the most because he's just icky all over. Like he's gaslighting all of these women. He's just like, he's like in a position of trust and so much like access to these women, and he's just like doing away with that responsibility, which I guess is kind of par for the course for this point in time, and even now, which is sad. But yeah, I think that's why I really hated Dr. Vincent. But I guess if I were to choose from the girls, the character that I like the most would probably be, for some reason, I am feeling something for Brioni. I don't know if it's because she was just so like making the most out of her situation. Like she's the one that's like doing the handkerchiefs for her wedding and stuff, and then she got dumped inside after she has sewn 100 handkerchiefs. I feel so bad for her. And then I don't like Rose that much. I feel like she was saying too much, but she isn't really doing. Like she's giving a lot of lip service for what she stands for, I suppose, but I don't really see her acting on it. Kind of. So yeah, that's me.
I really liked her anger, though. I really liked Rose's anger.
To be fair, yeah.
I liked her anger, but I agree.
I feel like Rose gave some of like the comic relief to the book. There were some moments where she was like standing up for, like when Zinnia first came to the house and she was like, "You're not going to put the black girl in the attic." And then she was like, "Actually, that'd be okay. Like, that's fine." Rose is like, "No." Yeah, I loved it because at the same time she's like standing up for someone, but she also just like is overstepping in a certain way that made her a very real character.
Abrasive, I guess. Yeah.
I appreciated Rose as the bumbling white girl stereotype. I was like, oh, actually, I feel like this is probably something that should be recognized, you know? So I thought that she did a pretty good job of like just being like, oh, I'm trying to be helpful. It's like, yeah, well, the intention's there, but she's like, actually, the attic sounds great. So like not allowing people to speak for themselves, but I do think she gave a lot of lip service, but I think that was kind of, I almost felt like Rose out of everyone maybe had the most personality, but I couldn't tell if maybe that was because she was just loud, but I was like
outspoken.
But I think she had the most maybe consistency in her personality.
I agree.
I think the villains probably had the most personality as far as like the girls versus the adults, because the girls were just kind of existing, which also makes sense because they haven't had very much life experience and they're really struggling to even exist. And so it kind of makes sense that he would put more of the personality into the adult characters. My least favorite was Reverend Jerry Webster. Get absolutely fucked. Like worst person in the world. There's a little bit of like discourse that I do appreciate out there on the internet, and we're talking about a man writing a book primarily about women and young women and pregnancy, and people will say like, what business does he have writing this story and whatnot. I think that it's really important for like white men in powerful positions or influential positions to talk about the fact that white men in influential positions are doing terrible things, and they're abusing their power, and like that needs to be acknowledged by more than just the people who are being oppressed by these people. So I respect so much about what he wrote in here and the way that he handled certain scenes and certain characters. While I do think he has flat characters, like that's it, the between a 4 and a 5 for me is the characters. I like so much of the story, and I ended up really liking where the plot was focused, but the characters are definitely not memorable. And I don't know if he does that on purpose. Like and people will also say like, oh, he writes women badly. I don't think that's true. I think he writes people. It's all of his characters. Every character in every book exists for the plot first. and the vibes first. His characters don't have that much of a personality. He wrote an entire book about vampires. One of the books that has gotten so much attention about vampires. It's on a list of all these vampire recommendations. You don't know that vampire's name. No one talks about the vampire in the book. They talk about he has a vampire book. The vampire is not even a standout figure, and he's the main character in that book. He doesn't write characters in general to be really prominent figures, I think.
Interesting. It's like he just built the plot. Like the plot was the purpose, and then I need a character for this. Okay, I'll put you in.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about messaging and themes. Any takeaways that you had? I think there are some that are more obvious than others, but I think all of them are valid to talk about. So, any themes that you recognized, appreciated being in the story?
I do appreciate the fact that there was an attempt made on showing how women are dehumanized, and that there's a lot of internalized shame and things that were being explored. I think that he was drawing from other people's experiences, and I did look into the fact that he did interview women and do research, and things like that, which is why I think that a lot of his portrayals of women, like in the circumstances they were in, while the characters were flat, I felt like the circumstances were what were being kind of pushed up, and like that's why I did like the first half of the book so much, is because I felt like there were some subtleties where I was like, oh, he must have interviewed a woman, I just found I didn't find that all of it was, I don't know, it was almost like an undercurrent for me. There was like an undercurrent of being like, yeah, but there's just some of these moments where they would hit correctly, but there was a hollowness to them. I don't know. I don't know. I work way too much off of vibes to give a proper explanation of themes, but I did feel that I appreciate that dehumanizing women was being explored and talked about on such a large and popular platform, especially from a man, just because it needs to be talked about. So
I think there's even like, I don't know how subtle it is, but I just love the fact that all the girls are named after flowers, because there's so much like metaphor just within that, like the idea of them being dehumanized in the first place, like their names are taken away, and it's for a reason, but then they're given these names that are related to objects. Like they don't get, there's just a fake name. They're now an object. They're not real human beings. And I like the idea of like this house being a garden of girls. Like I think that's interesting.
I think there's also something to be said about flowers as like being delicate.
Yeah.
Like how women or girls in this case are like they're just delicate, so we need to like hold their hand and they can like stand up for themselves, blah blah blah. So I think that kind of worked into that as well.
I agree. I'm not the best with explaining themes, and like I know that they're there. Like I can see you. I can see you there. I don't know your name. Like we met before, Like, oh hey, princess, we went to high school together. I'm like, I don't know who you are. That's how I feel about themes. Like cool. I probably know you, but I don't know you, But I will say that from somebody who hasn't read very many of his books and stuff, like I feel like he did such a great job with putting as much darkness over being a girl in the case and stuff, and being in a world where you literally have no say, and you have no say in what's going to happen to you. You have no say in like whether or not you can or cannot do things. And I feel like there is a big there's a word I'm looking for it. Give me a second. I don't read books. I don't know anything. A big spectrum of like there are so many points and times in this book where it's like I agree with this, and then it's like I totally disagree with this.
Right.
And there wasn't very much of like a gray area. And with Fern and such, because she's always gonna be Fern to me, right? With Fern, it's like even her going back and forth with like, I want to do this, I don't want to do this, like I want to do this, I just want to go back to what it was. Like they're totally right. I need to listen to the adults. I don't want to make them upset. I don't want anybody to be mad at me and stuff. But then like, oh, like they're wrong. Like they were wrong. And they like they lied, and it was like even her going back and forth and stuff. It shows like there is no gray area to certain things. It's like this or this, and I really appreciate that as somebody who sees things very black and white most of the time.
Mhm.
I have a very hard time with gray areas, so
Yeah.
I really appreciated that. And when I said earlier that he did the people of color characters dirty, in a sense of like there wasn't really much there for us to go off of. I had no idea that Miriam and Hagar were people of color until they said it. And I was like, oh, okay, my bad.
Mm.
Had no idea. But of course they would be in the kitchen. I guess that would make sense. Taking
Mhm.
care and cooking for everybody. That makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, we were supposed to talk about who we wanted to see more from in the book. And I think a lot of people's answer would be Hagar.
Hagar.
Because at the point where we got Mrs. Wellwood's backstory, I wasn't expecting us to get it. I thought we were just going to leave the adults as this like oppressive force, and I'm going to call them children. Yeah, the children in
They
the
are.
house. It was their story, and we were going to get their backstory. And in fact, we got less of their backstory than I was expecting. Sorry, I apparently have dogs. They're not mine, if you can hear. But when we got Mrs. Wellwood's backstory, and we found out that she'd been pregnant before, and her father, did stuff, and I wasn't expecting that to happen. And so I was like, okay, we're going to get Hagar's backstory too. We're going to get a little bit of that. And the fact that we didn't, I feel like was definitely a missed opportunity. Especially because she is a woman of color, and she does exist as a character who helps everybody. And I think it's great that the girls go to her at the end and they're like, she will help us, and she does help them. I think that's great, but she needs her own story arc. She should have her own motivations. And I appreciated the fact that she left her job at the end, because the thing about these girls is they didn't think about her life. They didn't think about her job, and they showed up at her door and they were like, we have a girl who's pregnant here. You need to help us, not thinking about the implications on her career and if she would lose her job. And so the fact that she then took her own power and like left her job and said to Mrs. Wellwood, I'm not continuing here. That was great to see, but we still needed more for her as a character.
Yeah. I don't know how she knew all the stuff that she knew. It's like, why do you know this? Like, why
how long have you been here?
Yeah. Like, how do you, like, what? And for her to care for the Wellguard, good, whatever the girl name is, for her to care so much for her to go to her house and be like, what's up? And everything was really cool. And the way that he integrated even like these Wellgood's like backstory, like it wasn't like a cut in between the chapter. It wasn't like a okay, we're here, and then boom. It was just like a instant thing. And it's like, whoa, hold on. Like it just changed instantly. And I thought that was really cool. It's definitely like taking me back a little bit. I was like, oh, okay, wait, hold on.
And I really wanted to see Hagar's perspective because I feel like it's an outside looking in, but also in a unique position that she's part of the household, but she's not part of the evil adult like, cohort of the household. So I feel like she's kind of torn in that sense that she's working with or working for these adults, but she also knows that okay, what they're doing is kind of sketchy and like evil. Like I felt that could have been a unique perspective as well.
Yeah, let's also talk about the theme of men being put at the front of the health of a woman. When that scene, I want to say something about the scenes regarding the birth scenes, because for one, I think it was really smart of Grady Hendrix, if he wanted to do a really horrific birth scene, to do it with the adult, to give the adult, Miss Wellwood, was birthing eels and had all this like fucked up dark magic going on in her. Yeah. And if you wanted to include such a graphic birth scene, I think that was a really smart way to do it, because I'm not going to want to read that, especially knowing that a man wrote it about a child. So I think to include that type of horror was really smart. Meanwhile, the scene that was really graphically birthed from the 15-year-old was so medical. It was so clinical, and I respect the hell out of the way that he wrote that, because I can't think of many other male horror authors who would have written it that way. I think it's so easy to take advantage of that scene and write something fucking weird. And I really like how he did it, because it was still disgusting. But it was respectful, in my opinion. As someone who has given birth and who has attended a lot of births, I can't tell you how real the birth scenes felt, the contractions and like everything they were going through. He must have talked to so many people. but there was one like disgusting description of like a triangle of flesh being stitched.
Yeah,
Shut up.
yeah.
That one messed me up so much.
Like the flap.
The flap of
Flap.
skin. But yeah, the husband stitch specifically that Luis mentioned, it was so real. It's so genuine, and it still happens today. It is still it's more of a question. It's no longer forced upon most people, but it is a question. People do get asked after labor if they want extra stitches for their husband. It's specifically worded that way, and it's crazy. So it being in there felt gross, but I respect that he put it in there because it's fucked up and real.
Yeah, or even like husbands will joke and be like, "Hey, can you add an extra stitch for me?"
Add it, absolutely.
Like, I wish the hell my husband would. Like, like sir, sir.
Okay, I don't know if there's any other themes anyone wanted to talk about.
I guess
go ahead.
Yeah, I guess going back to the themes, a more obvious one were like obviously the women's autonomy over their own bodies. But I thought it was also interesting that we got that not just from the pregnancy side of things, but also from the witchcraft side of things.
Right.
Because like from the pregnancy, we got obviously everyone's controlling their bodies, what they eat, whatever. But then from the witchcraft, it's also like, oh, you have no choice. I have to inhabit your body. You have to carry this line. You have to carry this legacy. You promise, whatever. And then so I feel like there's like those two sides of like these girls can't catch a break. Like everyone just wants to control their bodies, whether it's like all of these adults want to decide what they're doing with their bodies. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also, I guess in terms of like power, like is it okay to be powerful if there's no like mercy, or if there's no like, how do you know if you're just being cruel, or is it like revenge, or I don't know. I thought that was just an interesting conversation in there as well, although it's not very much like expounded upon.
Right. Or even like the mental side of like after birth, even with Rose and stuff, with her slapping herself in the face.
Yeah.
I don't deserve to cry and stuff. That was by far like one of the hardest parts for me to read. I mean, outside of the gruesomeness of her doing like the nail thing, I was like, ew, like, but I was like, oh, that's freaking me out. Like, but like even with her like slapping herself, like I don't deserve to cry. Like you can't cry, and like it was heartbreaking for her and such, and it was very difficult to read and such. Just that those parts and stuff, because both Rose and Fern had to deal with that whole thought of like, you know, even Fern going back and forth with like, I just want to hold her, and then like, no, I don't want to, and then I do and such. So like it was very, even like the mental fuckery side of it.
I think one of the things, like, because I did appreciate Rose's like perspective and, you know, wanting to keep the kid because like all these girls are freaking out and she's like, oh, I want mine. You know, I did notice that I couldn't help but notice that all of the girls after their birth had the maternal instinct of wanting to keep their child. Nobody was willing to let go of their child. I don't know. I wish we would have gotten a little bit more a little less shame around, because there is like this anti-pro-choice, you know, the propaganda of like motherhood and like, oh, if you don't want your child after it's born, like you're shit. And like there's a lot of internalized shame, and I didn't see that part explored when I would have liked it to, because even Fern, like I found Fern to be consistent in the fact that it was like, no, you know, I at least don't want the baby at the end. I don't want to deal with this, but it just felt like every single one of them, once they wanted it, you know, Diana had to swoop in to like talk them out of it or threaten them. It made sense with Rose's character, and I can see it happening with Fern's, but since we're not delving super strongly into character, and this is more messaging and themes, I think that it could have been explored like more about people not wanting their baby after being born, you know, like people do adoptions, and like even mentioning from another character or something like that, I think could have done a little bit more theme wise for me, just because that is such an internalized thing, and that is right now such a huge issue, that I did find that to be a little bit of a pain point. as far as the witchcraft went, theme-wise, I did find it unfortunate that it was kind of like it was
It was
the
just
evil
there.
librarian. Yeah,
Right.
like and
The
like
evil
the fact that
librarian.
and the fact that witchcraft was being used not as a way of finding agency, but instead it was being used as a non-consensual act, which I just I could be here all day and I won't. But having been raised with witchcraft, it was a really poor portrayal for me, where I was like, damn, I'm not being done any justice here. So yeah, that was unfortunate theme wise. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that actually really quickly when I move into favorite scenes and
Oh,
quotes,
sorry.
because
Yeah.
no, that's fine. I have a thought on that. I'm really glad you brought it up. But as far as what was I just thinking of? Oh, I completely agree. I was thinking about the same thing as you when all of the girls responded really similarly after birth. And I talked myself out of it because I was thinking, like, this is set in a certain time period where they don't even know that there's another option. Like, because they don't even understand how they got pregnant to begin with. They don't understand anything other than having a baby and keeping that baby.
Mhm.
That it is, I think it was a really realistic way to portray it. But Grady Hendrix needs to know that he's writing for the 2025 woman. And it would just be, even if not appropriate necessarily, to give more of a message to the reader that there is there's different journeys that are all completely valid as far as your connection to your child. Let's get into favorite scenes and quotes. Because what I really did appreciate about the witchcraft, and I've seen people talking about the witch stuff and how it's not portrayed in like the nicest way or the way they wanted it to be. I totally get that. I think that something I did really appreciate, though, was the scene where the witches were talking about how things were going to change because Holly was going to come into the thing and switch things up. And the quote that I highlighted in here was where Periwinkle was saying, "I'd rather save 2 live women than 100 dead ones." And Miss Parsay is saying the line must be preserved. And Megs is screaming no. And then Periwinkle again is, "I'd rather burn the library than build it on the bodies."
Yes.
And they're saying the way they don't know if Holly can carry the line. And what I realized, I wasn't even thinking about it in the moment, but once I finished the book, I realized that we don't actually get the answer if Holly is a part of it or not, as far as holding, like carrying the flame.
The line. Yeah.
Because like we know that she lives with the witches in the woods. That's what we get in the epilogue. We know that she impacted the pastor. We know that she got revenge in a certain way, but we don't know that she's actually a part of it. Because I think that we get an idea when we meet Megs. The first idea that we kind of get of this witchiness is that it hurts, is that it's harmful, is that it's scary, because Megs is having a really hard time with carrying all of the memories. But the other witches are joyful. Like they do feel a real connection and they love being a part of it. And so I felt conflicted when Holly was joining because I didn't feel like she really wanted to do it. And she was kind of being forced into it to protect her friends. But then I realized at the end, we don't know if Holly is actually a part of it. Like we don't know if it continued her trauma and if it's bad for her, or if she is living like just a free life with her baby in the woods with the witches. And I like to think that is how it is for her.
Yeah.
So that was my favorite scene. If anyone wants to share theirs.
Favorite scene. I did have quite a few scenes where, I mean, horror aspects aside, like I did like the horror aspects, like as much as you can. The eel scene was wicked. Like it was one of those things where I was like, oh shit. I was listening to this on audiobook. So the eel scene, all the birthing scenes, like the audiobook narrator, for better or for worse, she gets into it. So like you're getting like the voice oscillations and it's wild. But the eel scene was crazy memorable. But I did like the lake swimming scene and the card scene because I found it to be more like character developing pieces, which is something I do value more. but like the lake scene when they are all laying together and they're like the first one where they go to the water and they are talking about witchcraft and they are they're getting to know each other more and they're naked and they're just like vibing. I really enjoyed that scene, and then I also I just liked the card scene because it was a united front, like while heartbreaking of like what was happening. The fact that they were like playing cards so that Rose didn't have to get up, I liked that as well. And then the epilogue, but I think yeah.
Oh yeah, that's one of the
yeah. I'm like, but never mind. Poker face activated.
I can't really think of like a scene where I was like, oh, this is really dope. Like I was like, oh, I'm really into this scene. I can't really think of one.
You didn't like eels coming off that one?
It was
like that was it.
What I thought about during that scene was the fact that like there was a bucket full of eels and then Hagar left.
Smell that scene
and was like hammering their heads, and I was like, I do not want to think about that. Like, thanks. Like, but I think I really what was there are scenes that were thought provoking to me. Like I love the fact of them talking about carrying like your mother and your grandmother and like your great grandmother and stuff, like carrying that lineage. And I mean, I will admit that I probably went too deeply into my thoughts thinking about it and stuff, like my own head thoughts thinking about it, because my my grandma just passed recently. But I was thinking, I was like, there's so much that I don't know about like my like just like generations behind me or in front of me, I guess technically. And I was like, it would be really cool to have that type of connection. And I was wondering if he wrote it that way. Like I don't know if it was like for real in the sense of like these women are in your head and stuff, like kind of like Legendborn. I don't know if y'all read Legendborn, but yeah, I won't spoil it if you haven't and such. But like with Legendborn and stuff, like there's a part where she's able to speak to her past ancestors, and they're kind of like just chilling in her head, which sounds like claustrophobic a little bit.
Yeah, I imagine it similarly.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know if it was like if they were like literally like in there and they were like literally carrying their like these past people or not, or if it was like just like a metaphor for carrying that strength and trying to carry on that lineage type thing. So I thought that was really cool and very like thought provoking and such with that. And I think that's really it. There's I have a very hard time taking things in like that I can't see in my head. Like as I'm reading, I'm like, I can't see this, so I have really hard time taking some of that in most of the time. But I thought that was really thought provoking. I like the card scene as well. The card scene was dope until she lost her cool. But I like that about Rose, though. I like that about Rose, like in that sense. But yeah.
I think for me, my favorite like quote from the book was like at the very first page. It's the we're too young to understand that their job was to convince us that the most natural thing in the world was evil and the most evil thing in the world was natural. Because I felt like it kind of set the tone for the rest of the book, and it kind of tells you like straight out, okay, this is the theme of the book. Listen. So I thought that was kind of nice. In terms of scene, I actually really liked and also found horrifying the birth of Fern, like the medical, like how we got into this bird's eye view, very medical scene of Fern's birth, or like Fern birthing, because I feel like on one hand, like what Kayla said earlier, where it's like, okay, this is a very sort of kind of a respectful way of approaching this birthing scene of a 15-year-old. But on the other hand, I feel like it can also like speak to how women on the table giving birth are just like this medical object. Like, okay, it's a flap, it's a vagina, it's a okay, we cut here, we do this and do that. So it's a very like clinical approach, and it kind of like emphasizes how the girls or the women, the unwed mothers in this book are just like they're objects. They're just okay, I just need to do this task, check this off, give the baby to adoptive parents, and then ship this girl back to her parents. I feel like it was very clinical in that sense, and I kind of like how you could look at it on both ways as well. So I thought, and then the fingernails, I liked it for the horror part, because that was the part where I was like I was like shriveling up, and I kept looking at my fingernails. Like, are they still there? Okay, they're there.
I heard that's
So yeah,
so painful though. I heard like that's probably like one of the
it
most painful
is.
things you can do to yourself
I
is
feel
that.
like,
Yeah.
and like I get nails, acrylic nails, and sometimes when it just
Yeah.
like
Ah!
when it hits, when
I
it
like how we're
hits
all
it a
just
bit, I'm like, ugh.
I agree.
I think the most like for some reason visceral scene for me wasn't even the medical ones. It was when the witches were banging on the door. It felt like
Oh,
that scene was going on for a while, and I had switched to the audiobook at that point, and like listening to them describe like the yelling and banging, it just like really did something for me.
it was terrifying. That was terrifying.
It was hard for me to like. I feel like I had to vocalize some of the shouting and the chanting. I sounded stupid as fuck, but I feel like I had to do that to like get to feel what it feels like. So I think the audiobook would have been so much better for that part.
Or like the fact that like she couldn't see them, like so she was like sneaking around the house, like looking for them, and they're like right there. Like it was creepy. It was very creepy.
That was a cool bit of the witchcraft, and that's why I'm sad that it didn't go like deeper with the witch stuff, because scenes like that when they were like invisible were cool.
Yeah.
When they were like doing the little trick with Rose and like making the doctor get sick at the same time, and they were like testing their magic, I wanted more of that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, what did you think of the epilogue? So in the epilogue, I was not I don't love epilogues to begin with, like especially I think like in romance books, there's often like a 10 years in the future, everyone's happy and look at all the babies they have, and I'm like, this is just like too much. Like I don't love it. So I wasn't expecting to get an epilogue, and the fact that it was like 54 years in the future seemed so crazy. And I wonder why. I would love to ask him why he wanted to set it that long. I think maybe just to make such an impact of like how long it's been that Fern wasn't trying to get in contact with her child, and like that it's almost like too late, or maybe he's saying it's not too late, like it's never too late even when you're 70 years old, to have some type of closure. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I did think it was while my family member she is in her 70s, and her son just reached out to her from this exact situation where she was in a maternal home, and like this just happened like last year. So I was like, this is crazy. So I think I would say I liked the epilogue a lot because it did show like how long this impacts a person. It's not like you grow out of girlhood and then you're a woman and you get agency and autonomy. It's like, no, she hid this, like her sister didn't know for her entire life. She just explained it to her like 70-year-old sister or something like that. So it's like holding on to all of that and then still having the chance to have that release and like being able to try and connect once she reached out and everything. So I did appreciate, I mean, bittersweet as it was, I did appreciate the epilogue because it felt realistic to me. I was like, this like just happened, it was like kind of a light bulb moment for me where I was like, okay, he's definitely trying to do something. Like, I don't think that this man has malintent. It's just, intentions are intentions. But
I didn't even think about this as the timeline. It put us at current day. I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah.
I did not clock that at all.
I don't think none of us did. We're like, okay, yeah, 54, that's great.
I was like, if it started in the 70s and we went 54 years in the future, it's 1980.
Right?
That's math. That's math, folks.
Math is mathing, that makes sense. I think that like I like the epilogue in the sense of like I'm definitely like a finality type of person. Like I hate when authors leave things like open-ended, like, well, what do you think happened? I don't like that. Don't do that. I need conclusion. Like what's her name? Who wrote Sadie does that all the time. Courtney Summers does that all the time.
Summers,
drives me insane. Hate it. So I love the epilogue because of that finality, and I like the epilogue because of seeing the differences in between like what Rose did and what Fern did, and being able to see like both sides of it and such. Like I didn't cry or anything, I didn't cry like some of y'all did, like. But it definitely it was very impactful, especially the end when she's on the phone with Charlie and such, Charlie Brown and such. Like I was like, oh,
Yeah, I guess I'm glad we didn't get like a big reunion scene, and it was just like little references. It was like Rose is doing this. We know that Holly is alive, and we know that she got that revenge with the pastor. Because at first, when he didn't die in the scene where like Fern takes down the whole building, I was like, that's a missed opportunity. But there must be a reason for it. And so the fact that Grady Hendrix used that as a way in the book to expose the entire issue. In religion, certain religions and certain people taking advantage of people. I thought that was good because
I mean, I def wish that she did like freaking drown him though. That would have been great.
Yeah.
Like
or
like,
somebody.
come on, let's just like,
anyone.
You're already here. Like you already cut
the stones and just.
You're already here. Like you might as well take the opportunity. Like do the most.
But that's too easy. That's too easy for him to get away with it like that. He has to publicly repent.
Yeah.
Like that.
I think for me, I'm kind of like on the opposite side of Princess, where I tend to like ambiguous endings. I tend to like not knowing. I tend to like being like left where I'm like, oh, what happened? And then I go on my own like overthinking tangents and stuff. I tend to like that. So I usually don't like epilogues where they try to like, okay, this is what happened to this character. This is what happened to that character. So I'm not like a super fan of the epilogue of this one. But I do like that scene with the Reverend with like he suddenly like spontaneously being honest in front of everyone. I guess that was kind of cathartic in a way, like, okay, he's kind of humiliating himself. But there was also this part at the end where I guess the conclusion was, oh, I feel so empowered because of witchcraft, which I understand was kind of the message that they were trying to say at the end, but I don't quite know how the characters got to that conclusion after the experience that they've had. Like, I feel like with the whole witchcraft that they experienced, it was very like controlling, it was very scary, and I guess in a way it kind of allowed them to like kind of go crazy in a bit, like just do whatever they want. But then I feel like it was also such a traumatic experience where I'm like, how do you get the leap from I was empowered by that experience, which I guess could kind of make sense, but for me it kind of didn't. So there was that, and then I did kind of clock that it was 2024, 50 whatever years later, and I thought it was, well, I guess my math degree was useful for something for once. but I think what I thought about that was that maybe Grady Hendrix was trying to like, okay, say that this decisions that they made 50 whatever years ago has such a long impact. So us now in 2024, 2025, like the decisions that we're collectively making as a society, it's gonna impact our children for like 50 plus years, 100, whatever many years. I thought that was kind of like what he was trying to say, especially because he kind of mentioned Roe versus Wade specifically in the book. So maybe that's why he like put it into the present time.
Also, thinking about it being in the present is like, it's such a, now that I know that it was, it's such a good way to remind us that this stuff didn't happen that long ago, you know?
Yeah.
We talk all the time about how, like, let's remember people who worked on plantations, people who were enslaved. Those people are still alive. There are still like ramifications that people are feeling actively. And it's a good point with these homes as well, because this is a part of history that not a lot of people, a lot of people don't know about. And it still impacts people who you know, like you could know.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. What would you have changed? A quick rant session.
AKA rant.
You're right. We should have changed the order. I didn't think about this. Okay. So I appreciated that he did so much work researching with women. I did check his website after because I was like, it seemed I could not pinpoint where this man was coming from. I'm like, okay, you seem like you did a lot of good, but there's also a lot of there's a lot of things in here where I'm like, this doesn't feel good. I don't like this. The vibes are off. I think that it came down to the amount of research he did in some areas and other areas feeling like an afterthought. The witchcraft, there's no way. When I checked his website, he said that he drew from Gardner, which is an incredibly problematic I'm not going to get a whole thing into witchcraft, but an incredibly problematic man who was homophobic, transphobic, and very exclusive with witchcraft, and is not. He's one guy. he's a dude. He's a dude and duding, and the fact that he mixed that in with like Greek goddess mythology and like that side of witchcraft, that's a bastardized blend right there. And then he said, and then I just pulled the rest out of thin air, and I went, I believe you. Because like there are these things that come up that like I liked the idea of the ancestry that was coming in, because there is a lot of traditions having to do with passing on witchcraft and like nature and healing. Doulas, a lot, like there's like a lot of doulas that also fall into this category, and I felt like it was a missed opportunity to show that and then add in the mystical element, if you so please, because it's a horror novel. Instead, I felt like he kind of winged it a little too much, and there are so many damaging things in there, like making witchcraft come off as really like the people are unclean, crazy. At one point, Hagar, who is in my perspective one of the heroes of the story, calling the lead witch a thing, which, while I agree she was a horrendous person, it takes the humanity out of an entire like culture of people, and I did not care for the lack of research that felt in it. I do think that he got some really cool things out of it. I just think that overall, as a reading experience, I was like, this isn't it for me. And I wish he would have done a little bit more, as much research as he did with just women in general, because it can be a really empowering thing to look at. And I also think mystical witchcraft versus like, just healing and things like that can be really cool. And it can have a horror aspect, but yeah. It was a hit. It was a miss for me, but a hit as far as a lot of the women stuff. So I think that could have been bumped.
Noted. That's something interesting to look into, because I struggled with the witchy stuff, but in a completely different capacity, just in a way that I wanted it to be more witchy. I wanted it to be more fun as far as the witchiness. Like my favorite thing about one of my favorite movies of all time is The Craft, and it's so like it's dark, but it's also so fun when the girls are just sitting in a circle and they're changing the color of their hair and they're like doing all these like cutesy like things. I wanted more of that. There was a couple moments where they were doing some things in this book, but I wanted it to go further with the witchiness. And now I have things to look into, which I appreciate about the actual representation of the magic.
I agree.
Yeah.
I would probably. Oh, I'm sorry, Jade. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I do love things like The Craft. Like The Craft, I think actually does explore different layers of what people can do, and it does come back to agency. So I just want to say, like, love the Craft.
The Craft was really good.
Yeah, it's up there for me. It's classic.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, go on.
I would if I would say. Like, I don't personally feel like the book was too long. I've seen that comment a couple times that the book was too long. I don't necessarily think the book was too long. Especially if you're like listening to an audiobook, it's fairly like the noises that they're making and like the chants and the language is very interesting. I do feel like the colored I use that loosely. The colored characters.
Well, that's how they use it.
Yeah, exactly. The colored characters could have been done a little bit differently. Like, obviously, like, oh, well, she does music. Oh, yeah, of course. Jazz, of course, of course. No, why not? And I do feel like, Hagar should have had more, there should have been more put into it as far as she went. And like, I don't like things open-ended, like I said before and stuff. I like things to be explained, because now I'm just like, I'm questioning, like, why does she know all these things? Does her and the witch bitch got like a background? Like, they know each other?
Right.
Like,
I thought for a second they were going to have a love story between Hagar and Miss Woodworm. What was her name?
I thought that too.
Wellwood. For a second, I was like, are they going to be in love?
I did think that there were sapphic undertones. I felt.
Because remember when she showed up at her door, she was like, Miss Wellwood, I'm here to support you. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, she was like, you can't see me like this. I'm like, oh.
a part of me, like in the beginning of it, because like the first like witchcraft part of it doesn't happen until like 150 pages into it or so and everything. And I was just like, but is it real though? Like, is it real? Like I was questioning whether or not like, were they actually flying? Was the magic actually real? Or was it just like their perspective of it type thing? But then when she brought the whole house down to, okay, just kidding, girl, my bad. I didn't mean to like, my bad. Let me not question your gangster. I apologize. Like, but that's probably the only things that I would change is obviously to be more but I mean, okay, look, I say this. Hold on.
Go off, girl.
Hold on.
No, please.
I say this. I say that I would like for him to do the colored characters better, but I see why white people, respectfully, white people don't. I get it. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I get it. I understand. But like also though, like you could have said that she could have did anything besides fucking music. That would have been great. And you could have gave like the nanny character, the mammy in the kitchen. You could have gave her something else besides that. Like she is like the Aunt Jemima. Like okay, like what's up? Like what's good? Respectfully, and also yeah, they brought root magic into it. They said
that was I was gonna comment on that. Yeah,
and I was like, you could have gone so much more deeply into that if you were able to. Obviously, you know. So, yeah.
I think for me, kind of like how, because of how choppy the witchy scenes felt like, I kind of wanted the book itself to be its own thing, like kind of like Jumanji, where they got this book and they keep trying stuff and then like shitty things start happening, or like at the beginning it's effective, they get what they want, and then things start to go wrong, and the price is being like they had to pay some certain price that they didn't know about. I felt like I kind of wanted it to go that direction when it first came in, and I thought that would kind of help with the whole, like there's so many different types of witchcraft, and you know how Jade said that they kind of bastardize how witchcraft is by mixing a bunch of things. Like if it was just a book, a magical like book of stuff, it could have avoided that. And then also root work was mentioned like very in passing, like literally just once. And then I thought, oh, that was interesting. You have this character that is capable of doing root work. Like we could have gone the witchcraft in that direction, I feel like, and it would have given Hagar a lot more to her character, I suppose. So yeah, I think if I were to change something, that was what I wanted it to change. I just wanted Jumanji like with a book.
I like that. Actually.
Okay, let's wrap it up with any recommendations you have for any other books that like are similar or better, or like anything that just comes to mind that gives you similar vibes to this.
I think right off the bat, I would have to say Her Majesty's Royal Coven is one that I would maybe, that's like goes into the persecution of women, but also has queer inclusion. It's from a trans woman author exploring witchcraft with both a queer lens and just like looking at the problems with it and like how to be more inclusive. So it's kind of like the opposite of Gardner. And I think it just adds to the discussion versus sets the discussion back.
Right.
As far as, no, I feel like I could probably go on about like lots of witchy books and stuff like that. Sweep by Kate Tiernan is a Wiccan book, but horror novel wise, like I haven't read much like this, so there's that going for it. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
I would definitely say I saw in chat. Year of the Witching was really, really good.
Love Year of the Witching.
Henderson. I really liked it. House of Hunger, I'm not the biggest vampire fan, you know, but I really liked Year of the Witching. I did wish that it got like a lot more darker. Like it was like parts of it was dark, but I wish it got a lot more darker, because as soon as you hear anything about Lilith, you know that some shit's about to crack off. So I would prefer if it cracked off. Like so, but also I want to say a huge thank you to Kayla for one of her recommendations that I told this was like a while ago. I've been watching your videos for a while, but this was a while ago. You recommended Comfort Me with Apples.
Okay.
Obsessed I was obsessed with that book. I was calling people and be like, pick it up now, pick it up right now, like read it right now. And I was like, you will never get it until the end. You'll never get it. Like, it was so good. So I don't know how you would label that book necessarily, but
I don't know. I think it's like technically horror, but it's just like the themes around controlling women for sure. Absolutely, so similar.
No, that's a really good one.
So good, and it's short too.
I was gonna say it does a lot in a little
short amount of time. It was so good. So I highly
need
recommend
to read that.
Highly
you
recommend
should before you get spoiled for it.
I'm not gonna spoil you for it, but it was so good. It was so good.
I'd maybe spoil you. Don't ask me.
I guess first of all, I need to watch The Craft because I've not watched that. So I need to watch that. But as for recommendations, I guess the more obvious one, if you wanted to go into the like learning more, a little bit more, or diving a little bit more in the maternity homes, is obviously The Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. But this one is set in Ireland. It doesn't go deep, but it kind of explores the society, the emotions, like how people react to this type of institution. I think it was set in the 1980s because they still had maternity homes in Ireland at that time. And then another one that's kind of, if you want to go deeper into the pregnancy part, which I don't know if anyone does, but because that's usually such a topic that people don't like to read about. But if you want to go deeper into pregnancy stuff, there's this book that I read last year. It's called The Farm by Joanne Ramos. It's by a Filipino author. I think she's Filipino-American. I'm not sure. But it talks about overseas Filipino workers who are brought into this kind of dystopian institution that they're like surrogate mothers. So they're carrying babies for like rich people, and they're being in the same way as this maternity home, that they're being like cared for, like ultra high tech. There's like, I don't know, bands that plays Mozart or whatever, and they got the watches that track everything in their life, and they're being cared for and treated so well because their babies are going to be, I don't know, the next billionaire, the next president, or something like that. But then it also explores the exploitation of people from like overseas Filipino workers, or people like caregivers from third world countries. So it kind of explores that, as well as the women's autonomy over their pregnancy and like other people controlling their bodies and stuff. So it's kind of, it's not horror at all. There's no like fantastical elements. It's more of like dystopian, like talking about society kind of thing. So there's my
I appreciate
if you want
that.
more pregnancy.
Yeah. If I think the book club is full of people, not just who read thriller, mystery, and horror. Like, we're all reading such a variety of things. So there's so many directions to go. Like, this book opened up so many different conversations and could be so, there could be so many, like every different, I think I'm going to make an Instagram post with like 10 to 20 recommendations, depending on what part of the book you want to, Because I was thinking The Reformatory by Tanana Reeve-Dew, if you want to talk about historical horror. And this one, just like Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, has like paranormal kind of horror, but also the horrors of reality. Like, this has to do with a boy's home and a young Black boy who is wrongfully put in there, and his sister trying to get him out. That one's really good. And then We Ride Upon Sticks, which is one of my all-time favorite books. This is more of like in the fun, witchy way. If you want to just read like a little silly coven, it still talks about feminism, and there's a lot of queer representation in here, but it's a little more lighthearted. And then the one specifically where there was the scene with the people trying to get into the house, it made me think of And the Trees Crept In by Dawn Kurtagik. This one is written in a very strange way. There's like a mixed media, but there's also pages that are just like one word, and it's a really fun read. But it's the type of horror where the forest and the people in the forest are getting closer and closer to this house, and it's very claustrophobic. And then I was also thinking, if you want to read something about a crazy librarian, Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey is feminist librarian, historical but futuristic at the same time. Very strange little novella that I love. And if you want to talk about characters holding on to the trauma of generations that have come before, The Deep by River Solomon is so good. Again, it's a novella. I love a novella. This is about one specific character who's holding on to all of the trauma and how it affects them. And it's so good.
So good.
Those are some things that came to mind. I don't have very many pregnancy recommendations because I don't read it very often. I'm not often into the idea, but honestly, Grady Hendrix and the way that he handled it, it doesn't give me hope for other authors because I don't trust anybody. But it makes me a little more open to reading more about like motherhood and stuff because I don't often like it, but yeah, there are so many recommendations that have come in while I've been yapping, and my
They
favorite
were
thing
all
is
great.
to come back to this and like read through everybody's and consider what I need to read next. These feels a
my
lot
TBR
of
is gonna
things.
grow.
I know there's so many things to think
I
about
was
here.
trying to write them all down. I had like a pen out, and then I was like, I'm actually doomed. So I'm definitely
You have
coming
to
back.
come back after. Oh yeah, Slewfoot.
Yeah.
There's so many
Slewfoot
ideas.
has
Okay.
been on my mind for a while.
I'm just
It's
scared
so
of
good.
books that have like I just don't play with anything with like possession. I'm terrified of anything that has like possession in it. I'm just like I can't. I will literally be up in the middle of the night looking down the hallway like and I'll be like waking my husband up like, yo, I saw something. He'd be like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yeah, you're right, my bad. But like, so I can't do possession like that. But there is what is the one? Oh my god, it's like I've seen you talk about it. It's like purple cover, and it's about a girl who doesn't, or a woman who doesn't like her daughter, and her daughter starts doing weird stuff. What is it called?
Is it The Push?
Yes, The Push.
Oh, I hated that one.
I read it and was like, it's crazy. Some people might like it, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Young motherhood stories for sure, like Night Bitch, and there's a couple people mentioned The Change. That's another one that I didn't grab about like a group of older women and like taking back their power. I like the idea of it more often than not, like women who are getting control of their lives. So thank you so much for being here. This was a long one. I'm sorry I held you hostage for so long, but I really appreciated this discussion. Thank you to everybody who came and chatted in the comments and shared all of your thoughts. I hope for the majority of you, this was a good pick, and we will continue to be on an upward trajectory for all of the book club picks to come this year. So thank you three for joining me. And I'll see you next month talking about You Are Fatally Invited.
I hope that you feel better.
Thank you.
Bye.